Okay, cool. Well, it's what is it, July the 20th, and this is the first official network policy working group meeting. So we should be following CNCF guidelines now since we're recording, and we're all going to be on YouTube and everything, right? Um, Not that we weren't before; we would never violate any of those rules. But everybody be cool and let's have some fun and get into this. This is like just want to take a minute to thank everybody who has gotten us this far along. This is our, like I said, it's our first official meeting um, as an actual work group as of today. So thanks everyone for coming. Now let me share my screen here. Yeah, there we go. Okay. There it is, Firefox. Okay. All right. So my screen coming out okay? Okay.
Can you zoom in a bit?
Yeah.
Yes, I can see everything.
All right, there we go. How's that?
Better.
Cool. Okay. We have some new people here today. So how about everybody says hi? I wonder whether we can do, how about since this is our first official thing, how about everybody just introduces themselves for like 10 seconds? Does that work for y'all?
Yeah.
Let me see here. Okay, we got 18 people, so we should probably go fast, but what are you doing here and where do you work? Go ahead, start, Andrew, I guess.
Hey, I'm Andrew. I work at VMware on some Kubernetes networking stuff, so I'm here to see what's happening with network policies.
Yep, me too. I work with Andrew. So Azar. So
yeah, hi, this is Azar. I'm from Red Hat. Certainly involved in this network policy conversations, particularly as it pertains to secondary interfaces.
Cool. Varun?
Hey, my name is Varun. I work at Google on Kubernetes networking as well, and I'm here for kind of the same reason, trying to figure out where network policies are going in the near future.
Cool. And I think Zhang's here. She's also from Google. She's been a part of this from the beginning as well. Abhishek.
Hi, this is Abhishek. I'm also from VMware, and I have done some implementations of network policies for a couple of CNIs and most recently Entry.
Cool, yeah. And Abhishek got a haircut. Anish.
Hey, I'm Anish. I've been working with Zig Network a bit on dual stack and also work on networking in Azure from Microsoft.
Cool. Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris from IBM. I've worked on a lot of API work in SIGNet, most recently the Ingress stuff. But before that, I added the support for egress and CIDR support in the network policy API.
Cool. All right. And looks like Eric.
Hey guys, I'm Eric. I'm a solutions engineer at StackRox. It's a security platform for Kubernetes environments. Used to work with Jay in a previous life. He told me about this meetup. We have a lot of customers who are very curious about the upstream API and what's happening in network policy. So I'm here to help and contribute how I can.
Cool. Bowie just joined as well.
How are we doing intros? Hi, this is Bowie. I work on Kubernetes at Google.
Yeah. Cool. And Bowie's been real helpful with all this stuff as well. Getting RCAP in to get the validation stuff improved as well. So who else do we have? Freehan?
Yes, this is Minhan speaking. So I'm working at Google, working on the Kubernetes networking specifically.
Cool. and Gobind.
Yeah, hi. This is Govind. Is my video working? No. No.
I don't
Oh,
see
oh,
it,
here.
but I
Sorry.
can. That's good enough.
Is
Oh,
that
now-
working now?
Yeah.
Hey. Hi, my name is Govind. I'm a product manager at Google as well. I look at network policy and other network security things. Just curious to see how this conversation is shaping up and what use cases I'm seeing versus what the community is seeing.
Okay. And so let's see, Govind, Frank.
Yes, sorry, I'm just an innocent bystander because I got the invite and had little context, so I wanted to have a look.
That's cool. Lee.
Guys, hi, Lee Calcote. I'm with Layer 5. I'm here to help, to try to understand how where network policies are headed and how they interface with, sort of touch up against the world of service meshes, and here to help with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Lee Lewis.
Hi everyone, Louis Ryan. I work on service mesh related things here at Google.
Michael.
Hi, my name is Michael Zhou. I'm currently working in Qualcomm, and I'm pretty new to the Kubernetes network. I hope I can learn about Kubernetes and hope to contribute in the future.
Yeah. Matt. Eric.
Yeah, my name's Matt, and I'm also at Microsoft working on container networking.
Cool. Who else? We've got Michael and then Neha after that. Michael Zhu and then Neha.
Hey guys, I'm Neha. I'm from Microsoft as well. I'm working with in container networking, so working in network policies and curious about network policies plus and contributing in the group as well. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for everything you all have done over at Microsoft. You brought a lot of new ideas to this too as well. So Shufang Chen.
Hi. Hi. I'm Shufang, and I also come from Microsoft, and I work on the container networking, and I same team with Neha, and I'm hoping to contribute more in the Kubernetes community.
Cool. So if I missed anybody, please speak up. I see two more, Zhang and Sasu. So Zhang, you want to go, and then Sasu?
I am Such, so Shandor Such from working for Zalando. I added one use case into the stories. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the use case that you thought I deleted, but really I was just like being stupid and I did it on. Yeah,
thanks.
Sorry about that. I appreciate you coming back and helping us get it back in there. Zhang.
Yeah. Hey, this is Zhang. So I'm also from Google Kubernetes networking team and working on our class. Yeah.
Cool. And Yang Ding.
Hi, my name is Yang. I come from VMware, and I worked with AppShack a little bit on the cluster network policy side for Andrea, and I'm still currently contributing to that.
Cool. Okay, well those introductions were long, because more people joined as we started, so that's cool. So this is we've never had this many people before. What we've been doing has been pretty informal. We've just been kind of hanging out and talking about stuff and coming up with ideas and moving towards a more structured environment. But like this is going to be the first call where we actually scale to supporting like 25, 30 people. And so I'm probably going to need some feedback in terms of how we do that. And so just yell at me anytime if anybody thinks what we're doing is inefficient. But like where we were at, I'll just let everyone know where we're at. Like we had this structure we were following before, where we would have an agenda, and it served as an office hours for people who were new to policies, to network policy stuff. There weren't a whole lot of introductory questions, so we kind of skipped over that. And then a group of about 4 or 5 of us, or maybe 6 of us that were really engaged, were kind of hotly debating a few of these policies that sort of were really interesting. And then we eventually got to a point where, can everybody see the spreadsheet? Yeah.
I can.
Yep.
Yeah. So we eventually got to a point where we started to converge on, okay, here's a way to reduce the information content here and put some structure to this debate so we can maybe start to get to a point where we start taking some votes on things. I don't think we're going to be able to vote on anything today, though, because there's so many new people here that need to get caught up to speed. Cody's not here, who is also really heavily driving this. That I think we should probably take this meeting to just get everybody up to speed and to ask questions and stuff, and to maybe suggest any changes that we want to do now that we're an official working group. Because I know there's some people here who have run these things before who are pretty senior in the Kubernetes networking world, especially compared to me, right? We've got, Bowie's here, Andrew's here, a lot of other people. So maybe we should just start off by saying, let me just open this up and say, for those of you that have been coming and for those of you that are new, are there anything that you want to see out of this overall network policy, V2 design working group meeting that that we should talk about now? Because now's a great chance to change what we've been doing so that it's more efficient, or less efficient if that's what you want. I don't know.
I think a good start would be to just go over the user stories we have now and make sure that we're all on the same page of what the user story is.
Yeah.
And then maybe for the next meeting, we can start talking about what we think is more important than the others.
Okay.
And which of them should be in a V2 API and which one can be added on the V1 API.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we can just start. We can just literally go straight to the use cases, as Andrew suggested. We've done a lot of back and forth on this, and I'm pretty sure we definitely will never all be on the same page about it, right? But I think, yeah, no, you're right. If we can do an overview, that's probably a good start. These are tough to overview, I will say, though, because there's so much history that's gone into all of them. So what we did was we kind of made these colors, because the most important thing for the charter of this group originally was to figure out what people wanted, right? First of all. And so we kind of triaged them into green, yellow, and red. Things that everybody agrees we really need. Yellow, things that people kind of agree we might need, but not really sure whether it's actionable to get there. And then red being out of scope, seems like maybe a cool idea, but really tricky to figure out how we could move forward with it in a tactical way. So that's the simplest way to triage them. And there's one new use case. So maybe the best thing we can do is start off with the new use case. Was this? I think there's two new use cases, right? One was for the Kubernetes service endpoint egress rule, and then the other one was for what was the one from the bank? the guy at the bank, I forgot your name. Who's I deleted your use case on accident, and then you emailed me.
Well, I'm not working for a bank. It's Zalando is an online shop in Europe.
Online shop, yeah, okay. Yeah, you want to go first since I deleted your use case?
Yeah, sure. So I think I added something here and there, and then what I really want is basically having namespace separation, so such that we can have application namespaces and make sure that applications have to communicate through authenticated and authorized paths. So I really want to have this as a security gateway, basically, something that can, everyone can communicate to this one, and this can communicate to everything else, but the application shouldn't reach each other directly. This is understandable. I think it makes sense to read the example what I wrote.
Is this the one? Wait, is this the one highlighted in blue? I forgot which one is this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is highlighted.
Sure,
in blue.
cross namespace communication through a security gateway. As a cluster admin, I want to force communication through security gateway.
So for me, it's this is basically how we could isolate applications.
Are you saying you want to
in the
group
Kubernetes clusters?
Are you saying you want to group all the namespaces through like a virtual policy gateway type thing?
So what I would use basically as security gateway, I told this very abstract, but I would use our ingress controller, which already can do this authentication authorization things.
Mm-hmm.
And all HTTP communication across application boundaries should be going through this. And if
but are you suggesting an actual change to the policy, the existing network policy API, or just a new?
I'm not sure if this is even possible. Like, can we have namespaces? Like, can we say this is a network policy that I apply as cluster admin for all namespaces, and all namespaces get exactly this rule? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I always like to pull up the types.go, so I'm going to pull that up right now and share it because I feel like it's useful when we talk about these. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Here it is. Here's a link to it. So here's the API as it stands. And so most of the focus of this group, right, is like looking at these and saying like, how can we make them better? So as you know, you select a pod initially, right? And then you apply policies to it. And you do have selectors for, let's see, let's go down and look at, so these are our policies for namespaces. So do you want to maybe take a look at that maybe over the next few days and think about it a little bit in terms of how it might apply to your use case, the specifics of that, of whether you can do what you want to do with the pod selector and the namespace selector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That might be maybe a good start, right? And then we can make it a little more concrete.
I also want to
think part of the charter is not to suggest a use case, but at the same time, I think sometimes it's hard to blur the line between use cases and API changes, right?
Yeah, and I think we also have another use case in the document, which is specifically to add policies which can be created by administrators instead of developers. So I think that can be solved by this, adding a new cluster policy resource. Then you could then the administrator can allow namespaces to talk to each other and disallow that. I think maybe that can also target this use case.
Yeah, that might. And then there's also a namespace one where we make it so you don't have to label things anymore, and we do it directly.
That's using the name instead of labels.
Yeah.
So do I need to know the name of a namespace or label them?
Well, you need
Can
to
I
know
say all namespaces?
As of now, you need to use the labels, right? But one of the suggestions, I forgot who suggested it, in here was that we allow people to select directly a namespace. I don't remember what the motivation for that was. Maybe just that it's simpler. But I think
it comes up quite often. Do you just have like support a list of namespace by name and not having that, like that way you're not forced to like create a label on a namespace.
Yeah, it was
For
funny.
me, it would be like more like the default, you know. I can express something. Okay, this is allowed to communicate, but all namespaces that are created later. Like if we would create per application a namespace, it means that an application gets created, right? Now we create a namespace. Should we also create a policy for this, or could this be the default? You know?
Oh, default policies for namespaces. I think
this is an interesting. This is Bowie here. This is an interesting thing because we are seeing this in multiple places. I have a draft to the SIG-ARS to ask about what the policy is here across both with SIG-AUTH, because we were discussing in a different context using matching namespaces by label, and which was suggested by SIG-AUTH, but many people had good points that it may lead to problems. So it's good that actually we're hitting this as well. I can add it to another example.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is another one. Yeah, I think it's come up. Yeah, the whole default policy thing has come up. I heard it come up before as well. Wasn't there like a KEP around this too at some point? I don't know.
Yeah, Valerie had a kept for the default policies, but I think it was closed because a lot of people wanted a lot of things out of it. So that's why we're here.
I hope that doesn't happen to us. So, okay. So yeah, that's our first. So, okay. So thanks for contributing that. Right. So I think the best thing to do, Sandor, is take a look at the policy API, see if you can come up with something I think a little more concrete here in terms of what you mean by a secure gateway and whether or not you think changing the API explicitly is something you're interested in. Just reach out to me offline if you want to talk about it more. Because I've had to read through those APIs a bunch recently for something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, or other people can help too, I'm sure. So there's that one. Are there any other new use cases we should go through before we review all of them?
Let's just review them all. But can we time box each one to like 5 minutes so we make sure we go through all of them?
So we can at least get through. Yeah.
Yeah, and if folks want to add more, like, can they just maybe add a suggestion directly on the doc, and then Jay, maybe you can accept them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this should really be the last week that we add more because we've spent like so much time adding more. So please, everybody, now that we have so many people here, please just add a comment on the doc that you want to add another one, and we'll do it. And then next week, hopefully, will be the end of all the new use cases. Is that okay with everybody? We were supposed to really end the use cases a week ago, but I feel bad about doing it now that we have so many new people here. Yeah, so let's keep going. Okay, so add a level of indirection. This one's orange. I think it's interesting. I'm just going to say something about it really quick, which is that this is almost like an RBAC for policies, right? I've talked to a lot of people about it, and some people are interested in it, some people aren't, some people think it's a bad idea. That's why it's orange. If anybody wants to get behind that and champion it, please just add your name to this. Mike Spritzer was behind it for a while, but we haven't seen him recently. But I think it's a cool idea. We just haven't found a way to really move it forward. And it's a heavyweight change, of course, right? So that's one of the ones, Andrew, that would definitely be V2, I assume, right? Process restriction. This is the idea. You've got a container. Well, does anybody else want to introduce this idea? No, I'll introduce if no one else. This is just the situation where you got a container floating around in a cluster that's you've got a process that may have invaded a node or invaded a container somehow, or invaded a network namespace or whatever, and you want specific fine-grained policies that are capable of knowing things about processes. I don't know how it says I suggested this, but it was really me like writing down someone else suggested it and I forgot who it was. A lot of people agreed that would be interesting. Nobody's quite sure what it would look like if it was fleshed out. Named CIDR blocks, IP sets with synthesized labels. I think Cody was really driving this one. This was all about, anybody can chime in on these, by the way. I think this was related to, people have also talked about external CIDRs, right? So like being able to target find metadata traffic to a specific source or destination CIDR blocks. Yeah, I think it was to create sets of CIDRs that could be like collectively addressed, as opposed to like what we do now, which is you can give an IP block like manually, but you can't like identify that IP block in any kind of semantic way.
So is the idea that there's a new resource that has the CIDR blocks and you can reference those resources by name in the network policy?
I think that would be, yeah.
Yes, I think that's it. Yeah. So that you don't need to repeatedly write that blocks for every policy, right? You can just reference them. Yeah.
Yep.
Couldn't you just define the CIDR block and then the metadata is the name of which you call it?
That would probably be one implementation.
But prevents someone from doing that today.
Defining the CIDR block and the name, is that what you said? So
or you could just have an arbitrary name in your metadata for what you call this network policy.
Yeah, like, so you're saying you could just have a policy that specifically has that block in it and nothing else.
Right. I mean,
I guess what
is this just for a CIDR, like unbound by ingress or egress? You just want a way of classifying a CIDR?
Well, we never got the exact use case written out for this. So the user story is actually an implementation detail of how you would group these CIDRs by labels, right? And so, yeah, that always winds up begging the question of whether this is really needed, because you might be able to do this in different ways. But I think the use case behind the use case here, we should ask Cody. I'll leave a note here. Cody, make this, or anybody else, or use case. I think the thing here was that you want to be able to manage several different CIDR blocks, maybe as like a group, and that is not something that you can do right now, right? By like managing the blocks themselves by names, right? The data, that's not really something in the data model now. But you could do some kind of a one-to-one mapping type thing between CIDR blocks and policies and make specific policies for them. But we need to probably clarify that use case more. Port ranges with exceptions. Does anybody have anything else to say about that before I jump? Port ranges with exceptions. Yeah, so this is another one of the higher level use cases where, like you may say like this whole class of applications should be able to bind to any port above, or should be able to, access service calls on any port above 8,000 or something, right? Or, which means, which might just be like a catch-all easy way to manage some kind of a legacy application, which, might be connecting on multiple ports for different things, right? I think micro VMs was the main use case for this. We also had Spark in here, but I don't think Spark counts anymore, because Spark is nowadays it's very Kubernetes native, so you don't need to worry about that stuff. But the idea of VMs in containers suddenly becomes a really interesting use case here, because if you're running a VM inside of like if you're scheduling a VM and you want to apply network policy to it, you know, it may have a much more, you may want to give it a lot more bandwidth in terms of what it can do and what it can't do than you would a typical microservice.
There was another issue filed on Kubernetes wherein if you have to block just one port on a pod, you need to allow all the ports and except for that particular port. So it's kind of a little hassle to add those kind of policies.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You know, Abhishek, if you can add that use case issue link in here, that would be awesome.
We'll do it.
Remove hidden defaults. Oh yeah, I think this was mine because, so I'm not like, I'm a little, I you know, I haven't been doing the network policy thing for super long, right? So I'm a little bit new to this whole world. And so I started working on this stuff about, you know, 6-7 months ago. And it was really confusing for me to figure out all the null fields and everything. And I still don't really remember them all, but like there's little things, right? Like, you know, if you have like an empty list versus a missing list, we have completely different meaning behind those. If you don't have an ingress, if you don't supply any policy type and you say, then it's by default ingress. Which means that if you have an egress policy, you know, that has to be explicit. So you have a lack of symmetry in the API there. We have the corner cases outlined here. These are pretty, I don't think there's a huge debate that it would be nice to get rid of the defaults. I'm not sure whether these would be breaking or not. Matching a namespace by name, we already talked about that. Obviously, that's makes it a lot easier for people building policies. Zhang had this interesting thought about, well, what if you did regexes? Because you could imagine how easy it would be then once you had regexes, right? Because you could say all the namespaces that are named dev.star or whatever have more lenient policies than the ones that have prod.star and things like that, right? I think a lot of people really like the idea of namespace scoped policies as opposed to having to do everything with the labels. Especially because managing multiple labels and all that and being able to mutate labels, you may not have those RBAC permissions or whatever, things like that. I don't know why my was that related to the administrative policies too? I don't remember whether the namespace one was mixed in with that or not. Oh yeah, this is okay. I want to know why my application is not receiving any requests. So there's a collection of policies in here that are more about like meta tooling type stuff where, yeah, this was Ricardo's, but he can't. Unfortunately, Ricardo and Cody both had like last minute meetings today. So they both couldn't come. But they've both done a lot of work to really move this stuff forward. So this was a Ricardo policy, I think. And it's just a situation of, you know, he's got, you know, a whole bunch of developers and they just don't know why things can't talk to each other. And he wished there was more tooling around that. Abhishek, you have a logging rule also, a logging policy. Do you want to talk about that? Because you have the actions and the logging policies and that's all in this sort of scope too, right?
It was basically an issue to allow or have some hints at the rule level of network policies to allow the logging of the packets which are matched by those rules at ingress or egress rules. So I had a issue for that or request for it.
Yeah. So I think we're making pretty good pace here. I think in the next 5 minutes, I think I can get through all these. Then we can up level this and maybe we can add some sanity to this around what you were mentioning, Andrew, in terms of maybe we can address the whole thing of like, where should we start and what cutoffs can we do to really sort of make some tactical progress. I want to define default cluster network policy. We already talked about that, you know, administrative policies. So for those of you that are new, I guess the history here, and I wasn't necessarily here for this, so anybody who knows this better than me, please do correct me. But these were originally built for developers. That's what the network policy API was built for, right? So I'm a developer, I'm writing something, I want my pod to be able to talk to certain things. I'll just like write those policies, right? And I'll ship it with my app, and I'll apply those policies to my pod, so I know my, that was kind of the idea. It's kind of now people are really, a lot of people want these global policies. Some CNI providers have global policies. We know of at least two. I know Calico does. Ampered has them as well.
To be specific, by global, we mean cluster scoped network policy, not namespace scoped, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so yeah, like having some default, cluster scoped ones. I think that goes without saying because there's so many of those. There's mostly like several CNIs support those, and security tools support those as is. Prioritizing network policies. So how many of y'all have used SE Linux before? Right? So, in SE Linux, you can do like priorities and stuff of rules. I think that's kind of where this is coming from. Like, you may want to have like a kill switch, right? Like where you say, I've got this policy. No, this can't talk to anything else, but everything's broken and I did something wrong in my policies. So I just want to do an administrative override so that all the apps can start working again while I fix this. And maybe you could, so that's the prioritization thing. Right now, policies, for those of you that don't know, are kind of, once you apply a policy, things are locked, and then you layer the policies on top of it, the pod one at a time, right? And once you allow something, it's allowed forever, right? You can't like disallow it because after you allowed it, right? You can't have policies that affect the application of other policies, right? So it's it's layered that way. So that would give you a more sophisticated type of layering. The use case again I think of is administrative, getting everything to work, or doing the opposite, locking everything down because you have some kind of an emergency situation, right? Actions. Abhishek, you want to introduce this one?
Yeah, I think this was like a corollary to the cluster policy where instead of by having those kind of defaults of denying traffic and allowing certain traffic, you might want to just give the freedom to the policy writer to either allow traffic or deny traffic. So like this particular traffic should be allowed, this particular traffic should be denied. So add a new field and explicitly set the action for that rule.
Yeah.
Instead of having those defaults.
Yeah, that gives you some decoupling, right? So you can define things that target namespaces and target pods and all that, but you don't necessarily have to make the decision up front about what those do. Specify policy.
One question. So by defining an, sorry to interject. So one question with respect to the previous user story. Here is like by defining an action that means that changes the current assumption of network policies that is always allow all, right? Now, if I have an action specified against a rule, I mean today if I specify anything that means everything else is denied, only that port is specified. Like let's say if I've specified a port, only that port is allowed, everything else is by default denied. Now, by defining an action here, does that mean the similar thing? Like if I specify an action deny on a specific port, does that mean everything else is allowed?
No, so that was more in conjunction with like cluster scope policies and not the existing network policies, which would be meant for administrators to write, and they would have higher precedence over the Kubernetes network policies. So it won't affect the existing Kubernetes network policy defaulting. And that was the use case.
Okay.
Cool. Hopefully I answered. If not, then we can probably chat offline.
Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying that though. Yeah, because I get confused about almost every one of these policies. So actually any clarifying question that anybody wants to ask, please do, because there's a lot of ways we can interpret these. service level policies. So Bowie's here today. So Bowie, when we first started this call a while ago, you mentioned that this work should co-evolve with what's going on in Service v2. So the reason that people, I think, would want to target a service from a policy is because it's a more natural abstraction. Because when you're running an application, you generally think of that application as a service. And you could think of a use case where, for example, maybe I have two sets of pods. One's a stateful set, one's a deployment. And maybe those pods have different labels on them, but maybe those pods both subscribe to the same service. Maybe those are both load balanced from the same service. That's a valid Kubernetes use case. You could totally do that. I don't know why. I know that because I've done it before, and I know it's a horrible idea, but I did it. But that's like one example of this use case. So when we talk about Service v2, though, there's a whole nother. So that's one reason, but then there's a whole Service v2 angle to this. I'm not as up on the Service v2 stuff, so whoever's here that's working on the Service v2, especially when you talk about external services and things like that, are there any other motivating factors for why you would want to have a service boundary for defining your policies as opposed to just what we do now, which is pods and you know, and IP addresses and namespaces? Zhang also
had to drop.
Oh, he did. Okay, Zhang, I guess you were the. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
No, I was just gonna say I think it makes sense.
Okay. Zhang, I guess you were the original author. I'm looking at this, so.
I wanted to add one more angle to this, is that the service is already a grouping concept, right? You have the label selectors on the service already, and usually a service maps to an application, or it can have multiple deployments behind it and whatsoever. So having another set of label selector on network policy means that there must be some kind of synchronization between one network policy to its corresponding service configuration, right? If you change the label selector of the service or whatnot, your network policy also needs to update. Then there's a synchronization problem. So the idea of using network policy to apply to a service basically combine the two grouping mechanism into one. That is, only one label selector would be effective, and that is the source of truth. Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, after the initial, like the current network policy design, I think most of the early contributors admit that that was a problem. So yeah, hence this is the ask of having network policy directly applying to service.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great. Now, if you want to update that with some of those thoughts, feel free to, you know, because so one of the things I was hoping was people would really champion a few specific policies that they cared about and figure out how to organize them, because there's no way from the top down that a small group of people can say which one of these are more or less valuable.
So I think what's interesting with service is that, are we saying that we're only using service to select a set of pods using its label selector, or are we also like hooking into things like node ports and whatnot and applying policies at that level?
Yeah, that's also an angle, yes, because let's say you have a network policy protecting some pods, but then those pods can be accessed through node ports and things like that, right? Because it's gone added and things like that. So it doesn't work well because the service can bypass those network policies.
Yeah, so something we should probably chat in more detail in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I would say that those are more on implementation side, like how are you going to be sure consistency there. But the user story by itself is talking about that gap, which we just couldn't do right now for some cases. You can check the user story for the detail. But I agree that if you think about the implementation side, yes, that becomes pretty tricky there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the headless. So there's the whole headless service thing too, right? I think that was part of the angle too, right? Like you may want to actually have policies that target services that aren't even pods, right?
Right. Also, for example, you can use a service to direct it to some external database. If you only want some paths to access to that database, right now you have no way to do it. You almost have no way to do it, I would say. Because right now you can only use the egress policy of the path, which means you have to use a whitelist, which means you have to list all the things that path allowed to talk. Right. But if we have a service, then we can say, okay, only this part talk to the service because you kind of abstract things behind that service. Right.
The irony of this use case is that, you know, Cloud SQL was my first experience with that use case a few years ago. You know, so yeah, I think cloud providers, they really need it. So I'm not surprised that the folks from Google came up with this. So yeah, a lot of people need that. So network policy egress rule for the Kubernetes API. Oh, who was Adam? Did you get to introduce yourself? I forgot. Oh, I don't know if he's here. So this is one that maybe there's a solution to it. I just don't know what it is. So, you know, you've got your Kubernetes service, which is created on cluster inception, right? Creating an explicit policy for that service, right?
So the above service selector would address it because you can use the default Kubernetes service for it, maybe.
Yeah, I mean this would solve that use case. But it's a separate use case in that it's specific to the Kubernetes API, but you're right, it could be combined with that, right? So maybe we should just say could be addressed by generic service use case. Okay, but I don't know, I'm just curious, does anybody know like a workaround to this? Because it's kind of an interesting use case, right? Like everybody's got their Kubernetes local service, and how are people?
I'm a little confused. I'm not sure I understand. It looks like, so the user story starts by talking about denial ingress.
Yeah.
And now it's talking about egress. So I'm just a little confused.
The first dose at 100 milligrams. The patient had an SAE.
Let's read it. I would like to be able to create a network policy egress rule, which allows access to the Kubernetes API.
I think it's basically saying like deny all except API server.
Well, we're already at deny all except what's allowed.
Right. So like, how do you make it easy to allow egress to API server without having to know the individual IPs of the API server?
They're gonna like build up tolerance to it.
So
and give them
are we supposing the API server is running in a pod?
They gave themselves lots and
There's
lots.
some background noise.
I think someone's like on the phone with their doctor or something. Can they go on mute?
Yes, I muted. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so oh, that was you. That was the person that was also talking. So okay.
Yeah, maybe next week we can talk in more detail. But I think the assumption is that your API server is either running in a pod or the advertised endpoints are part of the Kubernetes service where you can find it.
He wants to reference, yeah, there's something about referencing it using labels. Yeah, so what exactly his specific use case is, I don't know, but yeah, that was his.
Patients that are on PA1.
But isn't the desired already possible? It's egress to pod selector based on a label match.
What pod would you be selecting though? Because it's a service endpoint. So I assume what happens is the kube proxy. Andrew, you probably know this. What happens is kube proxy makes a
Well,
service.
So
endpoint
I think I misspoke earlier. So API server isn't always running in a pod, but if you were running it in like a static pod, maybe you can label it and use that. But I don't think you can assume that it is.
You can't assume that it is, right?
I'm sorry, maybe my misunderstanding is the desired is already syntactically allowed, but we don't have implementations that implement it correctly.
No, because we do it by we're assuming you can't assume it's running in a pod, right?
Well, let's look at the desired that's written up here. Is that valid syntactically today?
Current.
Well, only if the API server is running in a pod, right?
So the author here seems to be assuming that's acceptable. The author has said the desired is what's shown. Okay, is the desired that's shown here acceptable today according to our syntax?
Yeah, let's follow up with Adam.
I think the problem here would be that the API server pod might be in a host network mode, and most implementations don't apply network policies to host network pods. So maybe that's the reason why.
It's a higher, it's a higher level.
Yeah.
This might work in certain cases, I think, is the short answer. But it won't work.
I think my point is simply that what's being requested here is not support for servers not running in a pod. It's not requesting support for service abstraction. It's requesting being able to implement that currently valid syntax in apparently some cases where it's not correctly implemented today.
Well, no, they did.
Yeah, it's not a, okay. So then we should, okay, so let's bounce this back to Adam.
For what it's worth, I also agree with Mike. The desired as written is syntactically valid and would work. So we need to make sure the assumption is you just trying to cover the case where, as mentioned, the host network would not be something that CNI authors have traditionally covered. And also, maybe this is something combined with one of the other previous things where you want to redirect this to something that isn't necessarily a pod that's outside the cluster.
Yeah.
I also have a confusion on another point here. Why are we talking about egress at all? Why aren't we doing this as ingress?
Oh, I don't know why he put that as egress.
Right? I mean, he starts with deny all ingress, right? And that's what we've got. Deny all ingress except what's allowed. So why doesn't he say what's desired is allowing this ingress?
I mean, you could actually look at this both ways. Is he actually trying to protect the pod or the API server?
Well, he's talking about limiting a connection from the pod to the API, allowing a connection from the pod to the API server, right? It's this, in this case, it's enabling. He's asking to be able to say something positive. We've already got the deny all except.
Yeah, we need to, okay. So we definitely need to get that figured out. Basically, he needs to separate this use case into the two different categories we talked about at the very least.
Well, if he really means that, I mean, I think maybe there's just some clarification and discussion to be had.
Yeah, we probably should just get his specific, like, what's he trying to do? Now, here's a whole other section. So we've got, oh gosh, it's been so fast. Okay, so this is, in 1 minute, there's all this whole discussion around stuff that's tools that are higher level policies, policy controllers. Me and Cody were batting around this idea of building a policy CTL, something that you could use to generate policies at a higher level without actually changing the API. So there's a whole bunch of body of like ideas around that people have proposed, and we put all those into a separate category just to constrain things a little bit. So if anybody wants to read over those, possibly talk about hacking on one of these things on the side or something, that could possibly be a useful tool that we build. Maybe that didn't even change the network policy API, just as a group of people that want better tools. Please do look at these. I think these to-dos, there's node policies. So these are really important. Everybody wants them. And I think we've all discussed this would be part of V1, right, Andrew? A few people have mentioned that, I believe. You've talked to some people about that as well, right?
think we need to have that conversation with the group here on what's V1, what's V2.
Yeah. But so there's a lot around this. We don't have a lot of time to go through it now. We can look at them again later, but node policies, and the defaults, making those, monitoring, specific for like some policies for monitoring specifically, yeah.
So the ask from Tim Hawkin was, before we start talking about like API changes, either to the existing V1 API or either to a new V2 API, we need to all get agreement, or at least like a majority consensus on the user stories. And ideally we have them all prioritized on like what we think is the highest priority one and what we think, and stack rank them.
Yeah, we need, So
I think if we can get that in the next few months, like that'd be pretty good progress.
Yeah. So I think we have to do this again next week though, because we have a few more to go through, right? And it sounds like we have so many new people here that I think we're gonna have to start over on some of them. So probably next week we should probably go through these maybe again, you think? Or how should we do this? Because we've kind of started to stack rank them. I just feel like the group we had that was doing the stack ranking was half the size of the group we have now. You know what I mean?
Sorry, can I ask a clarification question? This is Govind here again from Google. Just wanted to understand, is the intent here to do never policy v1.1? Is it v2, or is it like doing CRDs to add to the existing never policy fold, or everything, all of the above? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of like what is our target for scoping?
My understanding is that it's all of the above, but we are trying to nail down like what users are asking so we can decide which one to do first. And I think most likely we're going to do a 1.1 first.
I see, understood. So the green, yellow, and red doesn't mean that we're not going to touch yellow and red. It just means that green comes first.
Yeah, that's our first level of stack ranking, right?
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, because hopefully, even if we can't do some of these as part of the official SIG, if people want to make a group to build something, I think that would be really cool. That's what I would like to see. Like, I'd like to
I see some really interesting use cases like that are marked in red, and I just wanted to understand like when and if we'll ever tackle them.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, cool. So, okay, so we got 2 minutes. I just want to open this up for other people to talk, and I don't really care if we go over time, because this is new, but whatever. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about?
What's the ask from the group for the next meeting?
Is that a question directed at?
Yeah, for you, Jay. like what should we expect from the next meeting? Like, should we just all read the user stories through one more time and then come back with questions or clarifying?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing we could do to really move this forward is if people could start putting their names on some of these stories and read through them, because I don't think everybody's going to be an expert on all the stories, right? But if everybody who's really interested in a policy could put their name on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them, then we could have people to point to really formalize these policies as we try to harden the story around them. That would be my ask. So please just pick a few of these that you care about and read through all of them if you can. But I think it's just, there's too many ideas here for all of us to understand all of them in the way that would be needed to really make a really good story on them. That would be my ask. And come back and hang out with us and propose new ideas, even if they don't get into this specific doc, because that's what makes this fun for me, right?
Well, maybe also try some converging. That would make it fun too.
Yeah, so here's where we're at in terms of the converging, right? Is we've got these 14 So this was, I think, oh, by the way, Mike, it's good to have you back. I haven't seen you in a while.
I'm sorry. I have two calendars. I'm not good at keeping track of both of them.
No, it's great. So, but here's what we did since the last think time you were here is we've got these that kind of everybody kinds of agrees on, and we kind of put these all at the top, and then these are at the bottom. So I think next time we can flesh this spreadsheet out and revise it. Does anybody have any other questions about like any of these policies, what they mean that we want to talk about? And the other question I'll ask before we end is, does anybody want to get more involved with this and want to possibly meet again this week to prepare for Monday, since there's a lot of new people here? Does anybody want to, get a little deeper and get up to speed on some of these things? Because I'm happy to meet with anybody to get them up to speed with where things are if we don't have enough time today.
Now count me in. I'd like to.
Okay, cool. So Gobind, just reach out to me on Slack or whatever.
Okay.
And we'll just put something in Sig Network where we can all hang out again and do another call.
Sounds great.
Jay, this is Aniket here from Red Hat. If you go back to that spreadsheet, is there a desire to add a column for what use cases would get implemented in API v1 versus in API v1.1? Have you?
No, that we haven't figured that out yet. That was something Andrew mentioned is pretty high priority, right? Like figuring out now that we've got all these ideas, what can we actually do and when can we do them, right?
But yeah, that's a good idea. We should just add a column like v1 or v2 in there. And then
yeah. Last week there's like differing opinions on that, but I agree. Like having v1, v2 in here would be great. So this spreadsheet, is it linked from the top? Let me link this here. Please, folks, add columns to this. Add any columns you want, because, and especially that one, right? User stories, rankings. So I'll add that to this spreadsheet. So if y'all want, you can kind of add a column there, anybody, and start specking out like what might be V1 and V1 or V2. We may have to go through it all as a group anyways, though. Cool. So Gobind, yeah, please, let's just reach out on Signet and we'll talk more. And anybody else that wants to like kind of do like a turbo, get up to speed on where everything's at, and maybe carve up some ownership here, that would be cool. So let's move this things forward. It's going to be exciting. A lot of people are here now.
Awesome. Just one final question. I'm seeing some comments here on some user stories that explicitly say not a user story, see above, from a gentleman named Dan Winship. I'm just trying to understand what that means and if there's a certain format that needs to be adhered to or something. So I'm looking at, what is this, page 8 of 22 on the doc?
I think, yeah, there is a format, but I think what happened was we tried to reach that format and then we found that it's very hard.
Yeah, okay.
Story, so we kind of like got lazy about it, but it's really, everybody disagrees, it seems like, on what a user story is. And I think the best way to figure out whether something is a user story is if somebody says this isn't a user story, and then you fix it one at a time. But yeah, I mean, as you read through these, if things look too implementation specific,
okay,
if anybody has a chance to improve the user story, up level it a little bit so that we don't just deep dive into a bike shed about APIs, that's great. I think a lot of those suffer from the same problem. Though. It's very hard to write a user story.
Thanks.
So yeah, but yeah, please, anybody feel free to improve this stuff. These are open documents for the community to work on, right? And more ownership is something we need. So thanks everybody. We've gone a little over time, and so like that's it. I'll just leave it at that, and we can all hang out again soon, and we can talk in Sig Network about possibly having an intermediate meeting between now and Monday to get other folks up to speed. Cool. Yeah, thank you too, Gobind and everyone else. Yeah, we'll catch up this week.
All right, bye guys.